So today we have a special treat. You're going to only see my face because of his employment situation is not very good for him to show his face. I'm going to change the voice too. Mr. X actually came to Halifax for what? 2 years? 3 years now. What makes you move to Halifax?
So I guess it would be purely because of the job. So I'm from Toronto. When I was looking at jobs, I wanted to see what life was like outside of Toronto, and this is kind of the first one that popped up. I googled, Halifax just to check the population size, and in the Atlantic region, it's the biggest population size, so it seemed all right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much why I moved.
His parents are Hong Kong immigrant, if I'm correct.
So we are
Born and raised in Toronto.
Yes.
Educated
Yes.
in Toronto. So more or less, the Toronto is the only city you live in, or?
Yeah, it's the only city I've lived in.
Okay, but you just want to have a little bit of an adventure then.
Yeah, pretty much. If the job had come up in, I don't know, maybe like Alberta, I'd be in Alberta instead.
Okay, since you're not in Alberta but in Halifax, especially as a second generation immigrant, you have dim sum, you have cha chan tang, you have all kinds of goodies. Japanese food, Korean food. Have you been bored to death, bored to tears yet? 悶死你未啊?
Not yet. I guess it depends on what you're looking for. So, for me, and it depends on the kind of person that you are as well. If you're somebody that likes to go out a lot and you like to, eat at different kinds of places, you like to hang out with friends, if you're very social on almost like a daily or semi-daily level, maybe Halifax might not have all the places you're looking for. But for me, I'm like a 9-to-5 guy, I work my daily job. On the weekends I hang out with friends sometimes.
Okay.
And then, that's pretty much my life. So I guess it depends on what your lifestyle is like, what you're looking for. Halifax can be for some people. For others, it might not be the perfect fit.
okay.
So, since you mentioned you hang out with friends and all that, now, I suppose most of your friends are not from this area, so you more or less have to make a lot of new friends. 3 years or whatever you hang.
Yeah. So
okay.
I was pretty lucky. I had some family contacts that knew people out here, like yourself, James.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I pretty much met most of the people I hang out with at the local church.
Okay.
So since I'm Christian, there was already kind of like a shared common interest.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So it's not as hostile. It's not that bad making friends.
No, I wouldn't term it as hostile or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Well, actually, that is one of the concerns with my friends or relatives that are from Hong Kong and from Toronto, to a lesser extent Vancouver, but there are some. That always, maybe because of their fear, is, if you don't have a Chinese community, big Chinese community in your city, people will discriminate against Chinese, they will, 種族歧視，又話蝦你，又話睇低你。So, do you feel it that way since you're from a big city, Toronto, and then boom, into a mid-size, not much Chinese community here?
Well, because the church I go to, it's predominantly Chinese, so it wasn't that big of a difference in terms of like my contact with, I guess, the Chinese community. But I guess you would have two different kinds of experiences. If your English is good, then it's much easier to kind of like integrate into the overall community in Halifax by and large, because they all speak English, right?
Yeah.
If your English is limited, then you might have some issues kind of like communicating with like non-Chinese speaking individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's maybe that's what makes the biggest difference between me and, let's say,
Yeah.
somebody that's coming over from Hong Kong. It's our English speaking ability. But from my experiences, the people here are actually friendlier than the ones in Toronto.
Oh, good.
Like,
No, I'm very happy you mentioned this.
yeah, that's one of the big pluses. So even at work, like, if like everybody's really welcoming, if you get to know people, they invite you out to different places. I find it's really easy to make friends, like among groups that you find with similar, I guess, either age or like similar places in their life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too difficult, I find. But it is on you to kind of take the initiative.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for working environment, forget you don't feel that you're being singled out. Or I'm quite sure your employer doesn't have a lot of second generation Chinese floating around either. Not in Halifax.
There are some,
Some, I
but
know.
I would say my employer they're very good. Like, compared to the majority of employers in Halifax, they're probably at the top in terms of like, being equality and keeping things kind of like fair between all employees. They're at the top. I have heard kind of like, I have heard some things like there are two different issues here. Like one of them is in terms of like the pay.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to my colleagues who have worked in accounting firms before,
Mm-hmm.
like in the accounting departments or different areas, and compared to places like Toronto, the level of pay is quite a bit lower. So, for example, when I was talking to one of my friends, he works in the accounting department of my company, and when he started in a Big Four firm in Halifax, and they pay somewhere between $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Compared to Toronto, when I was just graduating, some of my friends I had met in university, they were in accounting, and they went into not even the Big Four, like a medium-sized firm. Like their starting salary was like $55,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that was many years ago, so it might have gone up with living wage increases. So from the people I've talked to, like, there is quite a difference between the pay gap between Toronto and a city like Halifax. So that's one of the things where there is a discrepancy, which is the pay. The second issue is, I guess, there are some employers that kind of take advantage of, I guess, people that aren't familiar with the laws. Like, I've heard of employers that they've offered to like help people out with PR if they work for free for them. And this has happened. I know somebody that this has happened to, and the employer didn't help them with PR, and they worked for them for free for like a couple of months. So I don't know if that's common, and I don't know if that's just kind of like a one-off or a very limited kind of scale.
But you are talking about in Toronto, this kind of pay gap exists
It exists now compared to
in Toronto, but in Halifax you don't.
No. I'm saying in Halifax they would be paid between the $30,000 to $40,000.
Okay.
And then in Toronto it would be starting around $50,000 to $55,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're, fair, on full disclosure, there is a pay difference, at least in that particular field.
In Halifax.
Yes.
Okay.
I also have a friend that works in consulting as well. He works for a Big Four firm in consulting, and he has told me that there is a pay difference between like bigger cities and smaller cities. It seems like it's a very common thing to do.
So in bigger cities,
Not to interview your city.
that's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's good to consider all things when making
right?
a decision on where to live and things like that. That being said, if you look at it on balance, to buy a house in Halifax, you can get like top of the line house for 400,000.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
In Toronto, if you're looking for in North York area, if you're looking for a one-bedroom condo around 500 square feet, that goes for around 500,000. So,
Yes.
there may be a fairly significant discrepancy in pay gap, but that's more than made up in the housing cost.
True.
It's on balance.
Yeah. So, okay. That's it. Let's go back to some of the pay gap between Toronto and Halifax. Yes. So when you're talking about, okay, for the big five firms, Toronto is 50 grand for accounting grad.
Yeah,
For Halifax, it's maybe 35.
somewhere there, yeah.
Is it mostly for everybody? For race, or is it just because you're Chinese, I pay you
35.
No, I don't think there's any, or very few employers would pay differently based off of race.
Okay, of course, it's illegal.
But one, it's illegal, and two, it's just not something that they would do. Yeah.
Okay.
But so it is more or less a regional discrepancy.
Yes, it's a,
Rather than a
rather than a race.
racial discrepancy. Okay, that's good to know. That's
If
good.
you're so there's that, and then I guess you wouldn't be looking so much at a pay discrepancy, but you could be looking at perhaps like a hiring discrepancy.
Okay.
So in certain fields where you need somebody to interact with the public. So I'm talking outside of government, of course, because government has very strict kind of like diversity hiring guidelines. But
Okay.
Outside of government, whenever they look to hire somebody for a job, they look for what they call fit. And in fit, they look at how well you can do your job and certain characteristics. So for example, if you're hiring for the fitness industry, you probably wouldn't hire somebody that doesn't look like they exercise on a regular basis. In the same way, if you're hiring for a certain position like a car salesman or some sort of sales position, or somebody who you need to get the trust of the other person, you would look for things like how well can this individual relate to my general customer base. So somebody who's hiring from a business perspective, they'll want to find the person that can relate best and connect best with the potential customer. So in that respect, if it's only hypothetical, but if
Okay.
your English is not as good, or it doesn't look like you're familiar with certain things, then they may choose to go with a different person just
Sure.
based off of a business related reason, not because you're Chinese or anything like that. It's just how well can this guy connect with my customer. So
Okay.
it's not racially motivated, but the reason is because they don't think you can connect as well.
Okay.
So it's not like they're saying we're doing it because you're Chinese. It's just a business reason. We're doing it because we don't think you can connect as well as somebody who's born here, who knows all the hockey players on the team, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some discrepancy in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's about this kind of a connection and all that. Okay, since you were brought up here, you probably know more than the hockey teams that I do.
Hockey's not actually one of my favorite sports, but
Yeah.
I do make an effort. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, but at least you were born here, you educated here from whatever, kindergarten up to university, and get your professional credentials and work at big firms or big organization. So for you, communication verbally and written is not a major hurdle. But for the recent immigrant, or they speak with a different accent, and so it may have a problem in the public, to how they deal with the public.
So yes and no. So you need to reach it depends on one, the job, and two, what your level of language competency is. So let's start with the language competency. Let's say you know well enough to communicate with either internal or external customers. If you know enough, and you know enough that they can understand you, then I think that's adequate. So that should be completely adequate. You don't need to speak in really fancy language or things like that. It's just you need to reach the level where you're able to communicate with them. And also, as more immigration comes in, specifically Chinese immigrants come to either Halifax or different parts of Canada, as well as Canadian businesses that do business overseas, they're actually looking for people that are fluent in both English and Chinese. So so anybody who has Chinese as their first, or Mandarin, or predominantly Mandarin as their first language, they would have a significant advantage in terms of hiring in those particular positions.
Yeah.
Of course, that's because that's their customer
Base.
But it's a little bit different from, I guess, other immigrants. So for example, if let's say you immigrated from if you immigrated from, let's say, South America, right? And you spoke Spanish. I would say by and large, Canadian firms do a little bit less business with like South America region than with Chinese regions or with the Asian regions.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
they would have a little
understandable.
bit of an advantage there, depending on the position.
So as you said, housing, especially here, is a lot better
It is, yes.
price-wise than Toronto, but it is not. It is still it's a tight market here now.
You would consider it a tight market, but it's not comparatively. It's nowhere near. So, for example, any of your viewers coming from Hong Kong would know that the Hong Kong market is crazy, right? Like on a single salary, you cannot afford to buy a place.
Not even sometimes on a double set.
Not even a double salary sometimes.
Yeah.
And we're talking like an apartment, not a house, right?
Oh yes, maybe 500 square feet, if lucky.
So, if you go to Toronto, it's possible to buy something. It's possible to buy something on a single person salary, but you would probably be outside of the major areas in Toronto, so you would be kind of like on the outskirts. If you compare that to Halifax, you could be working a little bit above minimum wage, and you could easily afford an apartment, probably not in the middle of the city, but pretty within close distance of the city.
Yes.
And if you're in like a professional job, you could afford a house probably on your own.
Yes.
So the discrepancy is quite large in terms of what you're making. So for somebody who's just starting out, who's making, like, let's say you graduated and you're working in some business-related field, or some tech-related field.
Yeah.
You could easily afford a house in a fairly central location, and it could be brand new as well.
Yes.
And when it's brand new, you can work with a builder to design it to yourself, have custom appliances, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So you wouldn't get that anywhere in Hong Kong or Toronto, BC, Vancouver, that area.
True.
So, I think I'm going to just stop the conversation here because it is pretty long, and maybe we have to come back for part 2.